Today's excerpt's going to be Babe the Blue Ox by S.E. Schlosser. Well, now one winter, it was so cold that all of the geese flew backward and all of the fish moved south and even the snow turned blue. Late at night it got so frigid the spoken words even froze solid before they could be heard. People had to wait until sunup to find out what folks were talking about the night before. Paul Bunyan went walking through the woods one day during that winter of the blue snow. He was knee-deep in blue snow when he heard a funny sound, somewhere between a bleat and a snort. Looking down, he saw a teeny-tiny baby blue ox just hopping about in the snow and snorting with rage on account of he was too short to see over the drifts. Paul Bunyan laughed when he saw the spunky little critter, and he took the little blue mite home with him. He warmed the little ox up by the fire, and he fluffed up, and he dried out. But he remained as blue as the snow that had stained him in the first place. So Paul decided to name him Babe the Blue Ox. Any creature raised in Paul Bunyan's camp tended to grow to massive proportions, and Babe was no exception. Folks stared at him for about 5 minutes, and they could see him growing right before their eyes. He grew so big that 42 axe handles plus a plug of tobacco could fit between his eyes, and it took a murder of crows a whole day to fly from one horn to the other. The laundryman used his horns to hang up all of the camp laundry, which would dry lickety-split because the wind blowing around at that height. Whenever he got an itch, Babe the Blue Ox had to find a cliff to rub against, because whenever he tried to rub against a tree, it fell over and begged for mercy. To whet his appetite, Babe would chew up 30 bales of hay, wire and all. It took 6 men with pickaroons to get all of the wire out of his teeth after his morning snack. And right after that, he'd have a ton of grain, and then he came around pestering the cook, Sourdough Sam, begging for yet another snack. Babe the Blue Ox was a great help around Paul Bunyan's logging camp. He could pull anything that had 2 ends, so Paul often used him to straighten out the pesky, twisted logging roads. By the time that Babe pulled the twists and the kinks out of the roads leading to the lumber camp, there was about 20 miles of extra road flopping about with nowhere to go. Paul rolled them up, and he used them to lay new road into the new timberland. Paul also used Babe the Blue Ox to pull the heavy tank wagon which was used to coat the newly straightened lumber roads with ice in the winter, until one day the tank sprung a leak that trickled down south and it became the Mississippi River. After that, Babe stuck to hauling logs, only he hated working in the summertime, so Paul had to paint the logging roads white after the spring thaw so that Babe would keep working through the summer. One summer, Babe the Blue Ox was hauling a load of logs down the whitewashed road, dreaming of the days when winter would feel cold again and the logs would slide easier on the ice. He glanced over the top of the mountain and he caught a glimpse of a pretty yellow calf grazing in the field. Well, he twisted out of his harness and lickety-split he stepped over the mountain to introduce himself. It was love at first sight, and Paul had to abandon his load and buy Bessie the yellow cow from the farmer before Babe could do any more hauling. Bessie the yellow cow grew to massive, yet dainty proportions that were suitable for the mate of Babe the Blue Ox. She had long yellow eyelashes that tickled the lumberjacks standing on the other end of the camp every time she blinked. She produced all the dairy products for the lumber camp, and each day Sourdough Sam made enough butter from her cream to grease the giant pancake griddle, and sometimes there was even enough left to butter the toast. The only bone of contention between Bessie and Babe was the weather. Babe loved the ice and the snow, but Bessie, she loved warm summer days. And one winter, Bessie grew so thin and pale that Paul Bunyan decided to ask his clerk, Johnny Inkslinger, to make her a pair of green goggles so that she would think that it was summer. And after that, Bessie grew happy and fat again and produced so much butter that Paul Bunyan had to use the leftovers to grease the whitewashed lumber roads in the summer. With the roads so slick all year round, hauling logs became much faster for Babe the Blue Ox, and so Babe eventually came to like summer as much as Bessie did.